Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sabres of Infinity and what might be the last episode of Sabres Infinity, because in the last episode, we finally turned around and went to a lovely ball and met the Duke of Wolfram. We met some Takaran ambassadors of sorts and got to learn a little bit about them and what their thoughts were on the whole situation. They're douches. Again, if you, I think I mentioned it in the last episode, but if you've ever played out Elder Scrolls and you know anything about the Aldmari Dominion from Skyrim, then yeah, that's pretty much the kind of feel that you got from Takara. But at the same time, they're very powerful. They can be a real big problem, but they also seem like they have their own internal struggles and stuff going on. But they don't really care about what's going on with us. We're not a concern to them at all. But yeah, that was pretty much how things wrapped up. But we also saw that the Lord Corabirits, I think that's how it's pronounced. Their army is advancing on us, and now they are here. So now we need to assemble and get ready for that. And we are here. So let's jump straight into it, shall we? Chapter 11, wherein the cavalry officer fights a great battle as part of the army of the Duke of Wolfram. So let's take a look at the stats real quick, shall we? Let's see. Well, our reputation is quite high right now. Our intellect is still 61, our charisma is a 50, our soldiering is a 49. So yeah. And I think in the next game we actually do get some different stats, so I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Our mercy is a 83 and our cynicism is a 70. So, you know, despite all the good things that have happened, our cynicism hasn't changed that much at all. And let's see, our actual force, we are the 6th Troop 3rd Squadron Royal Dragoons. Senior NCO, Staff Sergeant Lanzarote. Discipline is a 60, morale is a 50, and loyalty is a 70. So they are very loyal to me. And I don't think the state of the war has changed that much. No. Yeah, that hasn't changed that at all, because mainly we're at the end of the game. So now we will go ahead and proceed with this, and we shall see how this shall all turn out in the end. All right. When attempting to estimate the approximate strength of an enemy force, the King's regulations recommend that a scout first reason out the average size of a force marching behind a single banner, then count the number of banners in the entire force. From long experience, you already know that Antari battalions usually number 300 or 400 men. Lords of the Congress do not usually spare more in their effort to support the war. You also know that it is not uncommon for the Antari to assemble armies of 20 or even 30 banners in their mighty attempts to throw the Tierran army into the sea. Over the 6 years you've even heard news of an army of 45 banners broken up and defeated only at great cost and effort. You have almost counted your 80th when one of your dragoons taps you on the shoulder. Sir, Staff Sergeant Lanzer will compliment, sir. He's asking what's ahead of us. It is supremely difficult to put into words. The sight of hundreds, if not thousands, of church hussars in their massive banded armor atop great white horses, the sheer solid mass of Antari infantry in their tens of thousands, the fierce-faced hellions of the Central Plains, looking more like the mother of all barbarian hordes. The sight of each by themselves would be enough to drive a poet to tears of frustration. Altogether, coupled with the overpowering miasma of raw steel, gunpowder, manure, and the savage tug of bane might, you could not even begin to encapsulate the still distant but gargantuan presence of Corabirits' army, now advancing upon you like an incoming tide of soldiery, horseflesh, and steel. There are no words to describe it. You can only hand your spyglass over. The common-born dragoon puts the field telescope to his eye and sees to himself. Saint Octavius bouncing tits, he whispered, slack-jawed. How could there be so many? You shake your head. Never have you seen a force of such a gargantuan size. Without hesitation, you quickly scribble as much as you can onto a scrap of paper and swing yourself up your saddle. Within minutes, your troop is riding hard back towards Noringia. Oh, this is going to be lovely. Thankfully, an army of 40,000 moves at the pace of a tortoise. Even with the screen of light cavalry and scouts moving through the forest on foot, Corbeard's forces never had a chance of catching up to your men, as you all but ride your horses into the ground on the hasty journey southwards. You reach Noringia after 2 days at the rickety pace of near constant trot. Sweaty, ragged, and covered in dust, you burst into the Duke of Canaris' office just before sundown. Draken, by the saints, what is the meaning of this? Canaris demands as you stagger up to his desk, throat parched and raw from dust and the exertions of travel. You can only reply by setting your sweat-stained, soiled, and hastily written reports on the table. Your colonel's face turned ashen as he reads your missive. Saints have mercy, you hear him whisper, his voice full of terrible awe. Canaris shoves the message into the fold of his tunic as he springs up from his seat. Come with me, Lieutenant, he commands, heading for the door. You have little choice but to obey. You do not find it easy to keep up with the Duke of Canaris' long, hurried strides, with your legs and hindquarters as weary as they are from your mad ride south. Thankfully, you do not have to maintain pace for long. Your colonel's destination is no more than a few hundred paces away from your regimental office, the headquarters of the Duke of Wolfram. If anything, the Duke of Wolfram's reaction to your news is the exact opposite of Canaris's. It is the first time you've ever seen the old general truly smile. What fine news, gentlemen! Wolfram exclaims as he pours himself a celebratory glass of Antari whiskey, likely older and worth more than you are. So, young Corbett has proven himself the fool after all. I had feared that the Antari would split their forces in an attempt to take advantage of their numbers. Now we might face all of them on the ground of our own choosing. Better yet, once we break them, we shall have the entire summer and autumn to advance into central Antari, and the Congress shall have no armies to stop us. Canaris does not seem particularly convinced. Sir, the Antari still outnumber us 2 to 1. Does that not worry you in the slightest? The Duke of Wolfram shakes his head as he fills 2 more glasses, offering one to Canaris and another to you. Damnation, Canaris, do you trust me so little as to think that I've not a plan for this eventuality? We may discuss it later. For now, let us toast this welcome news and the bravery of the young men who had brought it to us. The glass shimmers red in the dying sunlight as you raise it up. The whiskey is smoky and rich as it burns its way down your throat. Now then, Lieutenant, Wolfram says as he places his empty glass on a table, what are your opinions on this? Surely you can see the great opportunity for victory we have before us. You swallow nervously. It is not every day that a mere lieutenant is asked a question by his army commander. You think carefully and reply, I'm not gonna tick him off. I'm just gonna go ahead and agree with him because, reputation and such. And also, it might ingratiate me with him later on. So absolutely, sir, I am confident of our chances of victory. Wolfram smiles triumphantly. There, you see, Canaris? Your lad is in my corner. Are you really, or are you just telling the old general what he wants to hear? Actually, when it comes to stuff like this, I am actually kind of confident because, for one, it's a lot easier to turn around. For one, they're not a centralized force. They are very, very powerful, but they're not a centralized force, so that's going to cause problems. But then also, too, when it comes to strategy games and stuff like that, I love a defensive fight. And it's a lot easier to turn around and do defensive fights because, for one, you typically have a fortification or something like that you can kind of, build yourself around to, and they have the onus of trying to get into it. And then also, when it's a big force like this, you can kind of it's a lot easier to turn around, and especially when you're dealing with muskets and stuff like that, you don't really have to worry about, being accurate and stuff like that. You can just volley and stuff like that. So I definitely do like these type of situations where you're outnumbered, but you're on the defensive end because the defensive battles are a little bit easier, in my opinion, than offensive battles. So actually, I'm confident in our victory. Canaris does not respond. Even he sees the lack of wisdom in pressing against Wolfram's optimistic prediction. What is your plan for this victory then, sir? He asks, deftly changing the subject. The old general smiles as he pours himself another glass. Call a meeting, Canaris. Brigade commanders, their staff, regimental commanders, and their lieutenant colonels, if you would so please. I will outline our course of action tonight, so that we might begin the march northwards tomorrow. Your colonel nods. Anything else, sir? Yes. This young officer and his troops should be rewarded. Set them at liberty for the remainder of the evening. Canaris nods. Wolfram turns to you. Do not think me ungrateful, lad. I will have you made captain next time I speak with His Majesty in a better regiment of your choosing. You have my word. If Canaris takes any umbrage at Wolfram's implication of the low character of your regiment, he does not show it. Even a man as powerful as he must tread carefully around the Duke of Wolfram. The old general sits back, glass in hand. Enjoy your evening, Lieutenant. Dismissed. All right. Your first priorities for the evening are a bath and a proper meal in that order. By the time you have eaten and made yourself presentable, the darkness of night has fallen upon Thuringia in full force. As you look up at the bright stars, a thought occurs to you that this may be the last night you will ever spend in town. After all, you are to depart for what is likely to be the greatest battle in Tierran history come the morning, and even triumphant armies do not win battles without losses. You resolve that you must make what could be your last night in Thuringia count for something. A number of possibilities come to mind. You've not spent the past 6 years without making acquaintances, after all. You decide to find Kazarosta, spend time with Elson, seek out Colonel Hunter and Major Hartigan, or spend the evening with your men. Interesting. Well, this is one of those rare exceptions where I'm not exactly friends with Kazarosta, but I still do feel like I need to actually build up something with him. I don't think this one actually have relations and stuff like that. Yeah, this game actually doesn't have the relations and stuff that the next game will have. But I'll spend some time with Kazarosa. I feel like we're gonna run into each other a lot. Elson, we're good. We don't need to really keep hashing things and stuff like that. But let's talk to Kazarosa and see what his thoughts are on this subject. Caius Daal Kazarosa does not prove to be a hard man to find. You know enough of his piety to try to seek him out at Thuringia's shrine first, a hunch which proves correct. The Deathborn Dragoon is not only the only Tierran soldier in the Coldstone edifice. There are dozens of soldiers, Banebloods, and Commonborn alike, kneeling in prayer before their patron or preferred saints. Kazarosa is amongst them, lips flickering in silent prayer as he kneels before an icon of St. Talbot. You wait for him to finish. There are hours enough left in the evening. You know Kazarosa too well to begrudge him his faith. Draken, he finally says as he looks up to face you, his prayer finished. I saw you following Canaris into Wolfram's office earlier today. Might I assume that you have found Corobirid's army and that we are to march to meet the Antari tomorrow? You nod, wondering how Kazarosa could have determined such a thing. Good, he says quietly in the cold voice you have grown used to hearing from him. Then my purpose may be soon at an end. To be honest, Kazarosa's fatalism puzzles you. Out of all your acquaintances, he seems most able to handle himself on the field of battle. Why? Do you think you might die in the battle? The other dragoon shakes his head. I rise every day knowing that I might die. However, if the saints wish me to give my life for their plan, this would seem a perfect time. No captain would sell their commission to a Deathborn, so I may advance no further in rank. Our war, and my last chance to make a reputation for myself, seems almost at an end. If the saints had some grand purpose, this would be the best time. Is that not so? You nod again. Kazarosa's reasoning does make sense from his rather warped point of view, except for one thing. If you think you're going to die, why bother praying at all? The Deathborn smiles, a cold and empty thing. His eyes slide toward the icon propped up against the stone wall. St. Talbot died at the Battle of Montjoy, leading a hopeless cavalry charge against Edwin the Strong's infantry squares. Some remember his bravery. All I can recall is the pointlessness of his martyrdom. My only wish is for my death to have purpose, for to leave something behind other than the admiration of idiots whom I will never meet. Why are you telling me this? You hear yourself say. Kazarosa meets your gaze, his eyes hard and unyielding, because nobody else would listen. The other dragoon stands up. Saints go with you, Dracone. It is only when he walks away that you realize that he's saying goodbye. Oh, that's nice. Wouldn't expect that from Kazarosa, but you know, the rare moments of these things, so yeah. Let's see. Let's spend some time with Elson now. You find Elson in the officers' club, a glass of potato wine in his hand. Judging from the way he sways upon his seat, you doubt that it is his first or even his fifth. Draken, come, sit with me, dear fellow, he commands, his voice still clear and unslurred for now. As you sit down at your squadron commander's table, he pours you a glass of your own and pushes it towards you. Drink, dear fellow, quickly too, before this place runs dry. You pick up the short glass and look forward. The familiar hall does seem to be more crowded than usual. Upon closer inspection, you realize that, like Elson, most of the officers present are in some stage of inebriation. They think they shall soon be dead. Elson draws in form of explanation. The Takarans are leaving. The implication is obvious. Should the Tiaran army lose its great battle, Corbirit will no doubt proceed to take Naringia by storm. In such a scenario, even diplomatic immunity would not serve much protection for a foreign envoy of any sort. Elson upends the contents of his glass into his open mouth and swallows roughly. They think we are bound to lose, Draken. I see nothing to dispute their prediction. What are we to do then, you ask, more out of curiosity regarding Elson's thoughts than anything else. Your captain's only response is to shrug and pour himself another drink. We shall drink, and we shall forget, I would hope. We shall spend 2 or 3 days marching north, too busy to think on it. Wolfram shall give a fine speech. We shall fight a great battle. We shall win, and nobody will ever speak of this night again. Elson's tone is flat and dead. Even his words of optimism seem nothing more than a shabby mask. Is that what you really think will happen? You hear yourself say. The captain shakes his head. No, it is what I hope will happen. The Saints have spent the last 6 years educating me on the difference. You find that you have nothing more to say. The two of you spend the next few minutes drinking in silence before the tension grows too intolerable and you make your goodbyes. Let's see. I will spend the rest of the evening with my men. Over the past 6 years, the constant influx of Tiaran soldiers have led to a commensurate increase in dives, gin shops, and other taverns for men of low breeding along the Naringia waterfront. It isn't difficult to find the ones where your men are congregating. You find your men huddled around a long table, mugs of dark beer in hand. They see you as you approach. Some of them shift over to give you room on the bench, a good sign. One of your men, a sergeant who had entered service under your command as a regular dragoon half a decade ago, raises his mug and leans in towards you. So, the old wolf going to scrap with the Antari? You nod. Then we're likely to get killed soon. Some of us, eh? You nod again. You wish you didn't have to, but your men are veterans now. They know well enough that the chances of a unit your size surviving a major battle without a single casualty would be in the neighborhood of the miracles. And you, sir? You like to get killed maybe too? Oh yes, in the most painful way possible if my luck holds. Had it been any other time, in any other tone of voice, from any other group of men, your subordinate's words would have been a naked threat. This night, however, the circumstances are different. The common-born dragoon clears his throat. Then I best say this now, in case one of us don't make it back. He turns to the end of the table, where Lenzerul sits listening. Staff Sarge, your permission? Lenzerul nods, carefully, as if even he were not sure what would be said. Sir, it's been 5 years since I first served under your command. In those years, I've seen you on your good days and your bad. I can't say that we're the fiercest lot of knaves in the world, because we've seen fiercer. What I can say is that you've taken these farmers, laborers, thugs, and broken men from a dozen different lives and turned us into the finest soldiers in the king's entire bloody army. So here's to you, sir, he shouts as he raises his mug. Here's to the one Bane-blooded git in an army of Bane-blooded gits daft enough and good enough to drink with his own men. To Lieutenant Daeron. Daeron, your men cheer as they hoist their mugs high and drain them. You put on a smile for the benefit of your men and hope that their high spirits will survive the battle to come. The march north drags on for an eternity and a half. For those used to the rapid pace of cavalry operations, the kilometers-long, mostly orange-coated ribbon that is the Duke of Wolfram's army seems to travel at a crawl. Thankfully, Canaris has managed to place your regiment near the head of the whole army. Judging by the amount of mud and manure and other debris which the 3 or 4 thousand men in front of you leave, you cannot particularly feel much envy for the line infantry regiments which make up the rear guard. I never really thought about that, the ones in the back, oof, good lord, all that stuff they have to, oof, oof. Due to the turning of the road, you cannot ever see more than a small portion of the army ahead of or behind you, even from your saddle. All you know of the 15,000 men beyond your sight are the stench of an army on the move and the sound of thousands of male voices, as which any large number of men in movement, the men sing to keep their spirits up and their feet in step. For 3 days, the forests of southern Antari ring with the words of the March of the King's Chosen, the last grenadier, bloody straight silver, and the maid as sweet as sorrow, as the men of the King's army march on under the summer sun. On the evening of the third day, when the songs have all been sung, and you've begun to grow accustomed even to the overpowering smell of raw steel, powder, and horse shit, the army makes camp at the opening of a great clearing, in the ruins of an old town and in the shadow of the 2 great towers of a crumbling stone castle. Even from perhaps 10 kilometers away, you can see the vast billows of smoke which issue from the sentinel lights and cook fires of the enemy. You bed down that night knowing that the next morning will see the greatest battle of your life. Early in the next morning, when the sun is no more than a wistful sigh of light on the horizon, you are called, along with every other troop and squadron commander in the regiment, to the Duke of Canaris' headquarters for a briefing. Gentlemen, it seems the saints have given us a fine day for saber work, he says, resplendent in his bane-hardened plate, as you and your fellow officers settle in around the large map in the center of the appropriated farmhouse. Better yet, now that we know that the Antari have not shown sufficient alacrity to seize the high ground. You understand what your colonel means as soon as you take a look at the map. A ridge runs across the open expanse of the clearing, perhaps the height of a 2-story house. Instead of taking it quickly, as would have been expected, the Antari had apparently ceded the advantageous terrain to your own army. Since we have the ridge, Canaris continues, the Duke of Wolfram has decided to position the main line of our infantry atop the high ground. Our artillery will be placed in 2 batteries. The first one here, in between Castamane and Turlbridge's brigades. Canaris points at a salient in the ridge which juts out northwards on a gentle curve. The second here, at the left flank of Havenport's brigade. The Duke looks up at each of you. You may have noticed that such a deployment would leave the second battery exposed from the left. That is where we shall come in. Wolfram expects that the Antari will attempt to charge those guns. However, we shall be covering them from here. Canaris taps at a point on the map, at a fanciful sketch of a ruined castle. We shall take up hidden positions before the morning sheds too much light upon us. That will allow us to deploy in secret. The Antari will not know of our presence until we open fire upon them. Canaris is interrupted by a raised hand. Have you a question, Captain Elson? Your squadron commander nods. Does this mean we shall not be fighting mounted, sir? The Duke nods in return. My orders from Wolfram are to dismount and fight from cover. His tone leaves no room for dissension. Elson's disappointment is palpable, but Canaris pays it no mind. I will require every one of you to be as alert as possible. We've no sign of the Antari Church Hussars. The peacocks haven't shown their faces quite yet. A wave of murmurs washes over the room. Some of your fellow officers actually cheer. If the deadly Antari Church Hussars are missing from the field, the battle would likely be much easier. One of the regiment's more senior officers, a major, does not share this optimism. He leans forward and points to a spot on the map 600 or 700 paces in front of the extreme right flank of your line. What about here, sir? The foliage is green enough to hide their bane signatures, and from what I saw of it last night, it is certainly tall enough to hide things a great deal bigger than a few thousand men on horses. Canaris shakes his head. Wolfram is of the opinion that the underbrush and floor are too rough to be passable by cavalry. This means that the hussars are most likely to try to strike from the opposite flank, our flank. The ground is more open there. Therefore, we must assume that shall be so. Am I made clear? We must assume the hussars will hit our flank and be prepared for that eventuality. Your brow furrows as you look at the area marked at the forest in question. For a moment, you consider asking Canaris if scouts had at least been sent to ensure the area had been free of the enemy, but it's too late. Your errant thoughts are quickly drowned out by the yes sir of the men around you. The moment to discuss such matters is already past. Oh boy, that could be bad. With the issue settled, the colonel continues along the course of his briefing. Major Keene, you will oh god. Liaise with the Duke of Wolfram's staff. Lieutenant Colonel Maris, you will take your 6th squadron and set up fighting positions in the Eastern Tower. I will take the 3rd and 4th squadrons and do the same in the Western Tower. Am I made clear? You nod with the other officers. It will take a drooling idiot to misread his orders. The colonel nods. Very good then, gentlemen. He pauses for a moment as if thinking of something substantial to mark the occasion. My fellow dragoons, this town which we are standing in is called Blogia. Blogia. Okay, that's a lovely name. The castle which we are to hold is the castle of Blogia. Remember that name well, gentlemen, for altogether it may seem strange to us now. It will be the word on everyone's lips soon enough. To your task, and may the saints watch over you. Dismissed. Alrighty then. This is going to be something. This is definitely going to be something indeed. Okay. The regiment rides to its assigned positions in darkness. The only thing you can see of the towers which you are to defend are their black shadows jutting into the slowly brightening sky. However, even in the pre-dawn gloom, you can see that your squadron commander is not in the best of spirits, sitting slouched in the saddle. Is this to be the only riding we are to do all day? You hear Elson muttering to himself. I have the finest squadron of horse in the king's army under my command, and they will not even suffer us to ride into battle. Now will be a good time to speak if you wish. I guess I could remind Elson of how vital our regiment's task is likely to be. Because I don't even have enough charm to even try that, so yeah. You pipe up. Surely, sir, you must realize how vital our role is to be. Why, if the Antari were to overwhelm us, they could take the army in the flank and roll up the entire line, as quickly as a carpet. Surely we have been assigned this task because somebody higher up considers us worth more in steadfastness under fire than any other regiment in the king's army. Your combination of enthusiasm and cold hard facts seem to win Elson over, at least a little. Perhaps you're right, dear fellow. We shall see then, shan't we? You do not hear Captain Elson speak to himself again, but although he doesn't quite crack a smile, he sits straighter in the saddle than he did before. This guy always needs cheering up. The ruined castle of Blogia is actually a rather impressive sight. Once you approach close enough to behold it in spite of the early morning gloom, the 2 decaying towers, standing some 60 or so paces apart, thrust into the sky like great pillars, surrounded by the ruins of the curtain wall which once encircled both them and the town standing in the shadow. The ruined old stronghold does not have the low business-like profile of Fernandez Court's old fortress, nor the picturesque grandeur of Naringia's ruined town walls, but the decaying and overgrown castle has an air of romance around it, as if heroic deeds were meant to take place in its shadow. It is, of course, also a perfect defensive position, impervious to everything except siege artillery and covering the gap between the thick forest behind you and the extreme flank of the main body of the Duke of Wolfram's army. By the time you and your dragoons set up fighting positions within the musty ruin of the Western Tower's upper floors, the field before you is lit in bright yellows and oranges by the now rising sun. However, It is the sight beyond that field which interests you more, the great mass of Prince Corobird's army as it moves into position on the opposite end. When you had first spied the vanguard of the Antari host less than a week before, you had thought that no sight wrought by mortals in this world could ever leave you so shaken again. Being proven wrong does not do much to calm your nerves. The difference between an army on the march and an army with ranks dressed in order for battle is the difference between bud and flower. But you had once beheld as a mass of fighting men on the march now unfolds its petaled splendor by the battalion. Thousands of infantry, with their weapons and metalwork blazing orange in the morning sun. A wave of flesh and steel and brown peasant homespun. Behind them stands a sea of horses, furs, and bright plumes of 100 colors, the Antari-like cavalry. The full, terrible spectacle of the army which the lords of the League Congress have sent to throw your army into the sea envelops the entire horizon. From one end of the field to the other, all you can see is the glitter of steel and the vast billows of dust behind it. Yikes. Your men, it seems, are in even more awe. How the bloody hell are we supposed to fight that? One of them shouts. More of your men nod, dumbstruck, as if they were doing battle with the saints themselves. Before you can respond, a confident, measured voice answers from behind you. They aren't guards, that army out there. Regardless of his own thoughts on the matter, it seems Captain Elson is still doing his best to boost the confidence of his men under his command. You're all afraid. Well, I can't help that, but what I can tell you is this: to keep a tight grip on that fear, to sit on it, listen to it when it seems to be speaking sense, but do not let it rule you. More men gather around to take some measure of confidence, of comfort in your captain's words. Every man fears, for a hero is not a man without fear, but a man who fears and fights on regardless. So keep fighting, dear fellows. Keep fighting and let the enemy give in to their fear first, because they will be thinking the exact same thing as you. The only thing keeping them going forward is the hope that we will break before they do. Well, that hope will turn to ashes in their throats, for they know not who we are. Elson has the entire squadron in rapt attention now, over 200 ears, begging for his next words. He does not disappoint. And who are we? He shouts. The answer is thunderous for every throat, yours included. Dragoons, dragoons, the king's dragoons. Nice. Your regimental cheer is still ringing in your head when Elson comes up to you, his expression jubilant. There, right there, he points at a glimmer of silver shining in the dust behind the vast formation of Antari-like cavalry. Take a look at that. You snap your field telescope to your eye for a closer view. On closer inspection, the faint dust-masked image shows itself as a suit of armor alight with the characteristic blue glow of bane-hardened plate. The Hussars, Draken. The Hussars are here, and better yet, they are on our flank. We shall face the finest heavy cavalry in Antar today. Oh, great. I remind Elson that having to face several thousand elite heavy cavalry is no cause for rejoicing. I'm not gonna bring his spirits down. So, Elson is right. If we win against Hussars, our glorious deeds will stand forever. The captain nods his head, a broad grin on his face. I can see it now. We shall charge them as a regiment, like proper cavalry. It will be just like the last great exercise at Fernandez Court. Elson favors you with a sly grin. Of course I won't fall off my horse this time, eh, dear fellow? You nod. The captain has come far from the unsteady boy you once knew in your training. As you open your mouth to voice the thought, you are quite rudely interrupted. Your words, and indeed your very thoughts, are drowned out by the rattle of 1,000 drums and the breathy whistle of just as many fifes as the serried ranks of the king's army finally begin to take field. You lean out of the castle window for a better view as the regiments of the king's army, of your army, advance to their positions along the ridge. Battalions of orange-coated soldiers advance in a great, graceful arc 4,000 paces wide, extending from the shadowy bulk of the eastern tower to the distant haze of the forest on the horizon. Their ranks sparkle with the flashes of morning sun on naked bayonets and polished musket barrels. The mortared stones under your feet rattle and tremble under the mighty foot. Ah, God. The mighty force of boots trampling the battered earth to the direction of drum beats as loud as thunder and as cacophonous as hail. The sound of the advancing Tierran army is joined by a blast of trumpets and the rapid beat of hoofs. You behold a great mass of horsemen, their armor silver in the sun, the wolf's head cuirassiers, the white rose lancers, and 2 or 3 other line cavalry regiments, led by the 2 dozen armored knights of Wolfram's bodyguard. They ride beneath a cloud of colorful banners, the 3 silver wolves corrent on blue of your army's commander, the fortresses and ship of Havenport, the arch and river of Castermain, and, greatest of them all, the quartered griffins and towers of the royal house of Rindaware. Some of your men give a ragged cheer as they see their fellow Tierrans take the field. The appearance of an allied host which seems just as mighty as the enemy's has put fire into their bellies and a thirst for victory into their hearts. The cavalry, and Wolfram's staff, take position on the far end of the line. The sound of fife and drum fade away as the massive formations of line infantry settle into their appointed positions in the battle line. Closer to you, but hidden by the bulk of the castle's other tower, you hear the full-throated shouts of gun crews as they wrestle the great iron barrels of their cannon to bear on the enemy. You remember the figures from the briefing: 17,300 men in 24 regiments, accompanied by 48 pieces of artillery, but numbers pale in comparison to the great army that stands alongside you. It is the greatest army that the unified kingdom of Tierra has ever fielded, facing the most formidable enemy host ever seen in its 150-year history. Today, history is to be made. You watch the field in what is almost a dreamlike state as the human tide of the Antari host edges closer and closer to the waiting cannon, muskets, and sabers of the king's army. Minutes, perhaps even hours, pass as the sun climbs high in the sky, and men in their thousands march and sweat and make what might be their final peace with the saints all around you. A concussive blast shatters your fatigued state. Your last shred of reverie fly away as you see the black trail of a heavy iron ball arc through the air away from your lines. The cannonball plows into the front ranks of the Antari infantry, leaving a trail of bloodied earth, body parts, and screams in its wake. The great battle has begun. More cannons fire. Given such a huge target, you doubt that the men servicing the iron field guns are much slowed in their reloading by a need for aim. Soon, every single one of the army's artillery pieces spits out cast iron defiance at the great host before them. The blast of cannon, near or distant, becomes all your ears know of the world. You can smell nothing save the acrid stench of burning powder. Entire regiments are swallowed up and hidden by the billows of powder smoke which issue from the constantly firing guns. Still, the Antari continue their implacable advance. Despite all their thunder and fury, your army's cannons seem to do nothing more than throw pebbles into the encroaching tide of enemy soldiery. Though every iron ball hits its mark and leaves ripples of blood and death behind them, the dead and the wounded are simply swallowed up by the mass of the living, and the tide grows ever closer. Though torn to ragged shreds by your cannon, the forward edges of the Antari foot continue to advance, lest they be trampled by the great mass of men behind them. As they step ever closer, the ground beneath your boots begin to shake with their tread. Their cries of war or defiance or mere nervousness reach your ears, as incoherent and wordless as they are. Still, hundreds of paces away, the enemy foot lacks the discipline of their Tierran counterparts. Distant pops and soft wisps of smoke mark those among the enemy ruled too much by their nerves, having fired their weapons long before their foes were in range. The sound of Antari shouts and tread are deafening now, drowning out even the sound of your own cannon. The forward elements of the enemy infantry are no more than 300 paces from the Daeron line when a thunderous wave of fire, smoke, and fury flences them into shreds of bone, blood, and flesh like a storm of flying blades. You've never seen what the artillerymen call case shots, a metal canister packed with hundreds of musket balls, in action before. However, after seeing the gory effects of the volley, even from a distance, you doubt you would ever want to see them again. For a moment, the Antari advance falters as screams of rage turn into screams of pain and fear. Confusion seems to reign supreme, and you wait with bated breath for the other boot to drop. From the Antari line, a man wearing a uniform dyed far too bright to be peasant homespun steps forward. In one hand, he carries a long blade of good steel. In the other, a blood red standard marked with the silver double-edged eagle, or silver double eagle of Antari. He's not alone. All along the line, similar men step forward, waving their banners and exhorting their less enthusiastic fellows to resume the advance. The Antari horde begins to march forward again. Victory, it seems, will not be so simple. The cadence of the Antari advance picks up speed from a walk to a full run. It is clear now that the enemy have no intentions at all of forming ranks and giving fire like a properly drilled army. Battalion, make ready! The command echoes down the vast line of orange-coated soldiery relayed by red-faced sergeants. On command, the first rank of each battalion, some 400 or 500 men total, crouch, their long bayonet-tipped infantry muskets pointed upwards. The second rank kneels behind them. The third snatches up their weapons, ready for their next command. Battalion, present arms! The sight of a company of 100 men bringing their muskets to bear on the enemy in a single motion is an impressive show. To see a battalion of 400 perform the same task is something of a wonder. To see 27 battalions and more than 10,000 men bring their weapons up to their shoulders and point them forwards is nothing short of unforgettable. But it pales before what you know is very soon to follow. Battalion, fire! Your world explodes in a cataclysm of smoke, fire, and rolling thunder as the main body of Daeron infantry fire their muskets. Less than 100 paces in front of them, the forward edges of the Antari advance melts away like ice under an open flame. The closely packed enemy tide stumbles upon itself, tripping and reeling over the windrows of their own dead now underfoot and before them. Some of the Antari standard bearers step forward again to resume the advance, but not many. No sooner have the Antari begin their steps forward does the steady crack of musket fire begin again. The battalion commanders have ordered their men to fire in their own time. All along the 10,000 man strong line, each individual soldier is reloading and firing at the approaching enemy as quickly as they can. A trained infantryman could manage 3 such shots in a minute, though there have been rumors of men who could do 6. Individually, a single man firing independently could do little harm to the Antari foot, but as one among an army, the steady storm of fire eats away at the ragged vanguard of the Antari foot, devouring the front ranks as others step forward to take their place. The miasma of battle begins to envelop you, the stench of powder and death. The smoke is everywhere, hanging over the entire battle like an ash-gray funeral shroud until it blots out the sun and the battle both, leaving your position in a thick and choking darkness. For the better part of an hour, the universe edges retreat to the walls of Castle Blogia, hemmed in by powder smoke and bounded by the rattle of musketry, screams, and the occasional clatter of steel on steel. Damn me, you hear one of the other dragoons say. I thought we was to be fighting today. He's not the only one. Some of the others around him grumble in agreement. How do I respond? Let me see. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have fighting at some point, so I mean, this shouldn't really matter. Perhaps the battle is to pass us by. No, my men don't want that. Fear not, gentlemen, we shall have our fill of blood by the day's end. Then again, I kind of want my men to be cautious to keep an eye out. The Antari may attack us yet. Yeah, I'll go with this. The enlisted man grins, showing a mouthful of jagged teeth. I hope so, sir. Unfair to make the foot do all the killing work. A ragged chuckle fills the air, the tension much relieved. Finally, an hour after midday, the sound of battle fade away. The powder fog begins to thin under the gentle urging of an early afternoon breeze. You peer into the distance, trying to make out the situation on the field. A hole forms in the smoke, just large enough to give you the sight of the Antari foot soldiers fleeing before the fixed bayonets of the Daeron infantry. Is it over? Elson looks out, leaning out the window to your left, his tone disappointed. Gazrosa appears at your right. Hardly. Our infantry have merely repulsed their first attempt. As the smoke clears further, the wider image resolves itself. The Antari foot are in full disarray, their standard bearers dead or fleeing with the general mass of their comrades. Behind them, the battered but intact ranks of the Daeron infantry advance down the ridge, their fixed bayonets gleaming in the returning sun. You're not the only one watching. Your men see it too. Despite Kazarosa's cynicism and their previous complaint, they seem quite happy to cheer their impending victory. Suddenly, a scattering of blows strike the Antari rear. The trailing elements of the retreating foe halt as ragged holes are blasted into their tightly packed mob. Our artillery does not seem quite content with letting the Antari leave the field, Kazarosa observes. Elson shakes his head, his expression full of confusion. Our guns haven't the range to strike so far. You reach for your field glass and put the lens to your eye just in time to see puffs of smoke sprout from field fortifications far to the rear of the Antari army. A moment later, another volley of cannonballs slam into the backside of the enemy foot. The Antari are firing into their own men, you exclaim. Captain Nelson slams his fist against the stone wall, his countenance furious. Damn their barbarism. To turn one's own guns against one's own bloody army. What madness has possessed the Antari to do such a thing? Not madness, pragmatism, Kazarosa replies, his voice chilly. Look. He points at the ragged mass of the Antari infantry, now attacked from both sides as they turn to face the fixed bayonets of the Daeron line once more. They are now more fearful of retreat than they are of advance, so they take the path of least resistance. Both men glare at each other, their difference in opinion clearly irreconcilable. They turn to you to solve their dispute. What do you think of this? Well, I mean, on the one hand, I do kind of agree with Kazarosa. It is pragmatic to turn around and do it. At the same time, it is a little rough. And I'm going to be nicer this time around, so... well, typically I would agree with Elson in this because, I'm trying to be nicer this time around. But I'm just going to stay out of it altogether. I'm just going to say I don't agree with either of them. This also kind of reminds me of, I think it was during the Battle of Sekigahara, where I think it was Kobayakawa. He was supposed to side with one side, either the Eastern forces or the Western forces, and he wouldn't make up his mind. So then I think from what I remember about the history, Ieyasu Tokugawa turned his cannons and fired. He either turned his cannons or he turned his muskets and he fired at Kobayakawa to convince him to do something because he just got tired of dealing with him. And finally, he decided to turn around and side with Tokugawa. So this kind of reminds me of the same thing where it's just like, well, if you're going to come back and fight this way, we're going to kill you. So either you die at their hands or you die at our hands. So, I don't agree with either of them. You open your mouth to voice your opinion. Oi, sirs, what's that? You, Kazarosa, and Elson all turn to where the enlisted man is pointing. You spot a shimmer of movement along the far end of the Antari line, moving quickly and quickly growing larger. Almost in unison, the three of you bring your field telescopes to your eyes. Your heart freezes when you see them. Church hussars, thousands of them, gleaming in bane plate, angel wings glittering in the summer sun, charging out from the woods on the opposite end of the field and riding at full gallop at the flank of the Daeron army, a great banner emblazoned with the sword-carrying bear of House Corabirids fluttering at their head. By all the saints, your captain exclaims, his spyglass clutched tightly in his trembling white hands. Even Casarosa's formidable composure seems rattled. Did Wolfram not assure us that those woods were impassable? Apparently, Prince Corabirid disagrees with that assessment. Elson's terrified tone is much at odds with his flippant words. You mutter under your breath as you struggle not to let fear overtake you. What was that? Casarosa asks. You repeat yourself more clearly this time. Oh boy. What will be our next move? Casarosa shakes his head. We can do nothing. If we charge out there alone, we would accomplish nothing. Elson makes a little strangled sound in his throat as he bites back a hot retort. Casarosa continues unfazed. His voice is cold as ice. Wolfram, on the other hand, must ride out to meet Corabirid's hussars. He has all the cavalry on his flank save for us, and if he does nothing, those hussars will be able to roll up the line and cut down the entire army at their leisure. The distant blast of trumpets brings your attention to the field once again. Your heart leaps into your throat as you see the Duke of Wolfram's banner flutter free in the gray wind as the Duke and his Daeron cavalry ride forth to meet the enemy hussars head on. You watch with bated breath as the two massive formations of cavalry converge on each other. Sabres, broadswords, lances, and armor glittering in the sun. The ground trembles as the Antari and Daeron horse surge towards their titanic clash. Battalion, fire! In an instant, powder smoke and fire blot out your view. The sound of the distant clash is drowned out by the closer sound of massed musketry as Daeron infantry fire upon the returning horde of Antari foot. Once again, your world shrinks to a single floor of a single tower, bordered by smoke and fire and the screams of the dying. Jesus Christ, this battle. Okay. A half hour later, the battle pierces the veil of fog and fire again, this time in the form of a messenger, one of the Duke of Canaris' staff. Begging your pardon, sir, the colonel wants to see all three of you downstairs right now. You descend the crumbling stairs to the ground floor of the tower to see Canaris surrounded by the other officers of the regiment and speaking in hushed tones with a man wearing a major's insignia covered in blood and filth and bruises. It is only when you get close enough to hear their conversations that you realize he's wearing the gray-green of the dragoons. Have already battered them to pieces. Turber's brigade is being hit hard in the right flank. Canaris' expression is tired and drawn, as if he were a man twice his age. And Wolfram? He asks, his voice soft with anxiety. The other officer bows his head in sadness. Dead, sir. The Earl of Wales and Viscount Hafford, too. If anyone is still in command of the cavalry, I know not whom. Oh, shit. I didn't know he was dead. You hear Elson give a choked sob. He staggers as if he had been struck in the stomach. The door slams open. What's all this? Wolfram? Dead? Asks a new voice belonging to Lieutenant Colonel Maris, the commander of 6th Squadron and second in command of the regiment. Canaris nods. As Major Keene was in the process of telling us, the battle goes poorly. Our right flank is in disarray, as is the chain of command. I'm afraid that this regiment must act now independently if the situation is to be made salvageable. Have you gentlemen any suggestions? Maris claps his hand together before any discussion could ensue. We must attack, he declares boldly. For a moment there is only silence as the regiment's second in command strokes his unfashionably luxuriant facial hair. Then, as enthusiastically explosive as before, he continues, yes, if we strike from this flank, the Antari will be forced to face us and give our brothers on the other flank the time to gain the initiative. Let us lead a valiant charge and tip the balance of the battle in our favor, your grace. For king, for glory, and for all the saints, let it be so. Perhaps it is something in the air, but the lieutenant colonel's exuberant bloodlust seems to be contagious. Canaris, at the verge of despair a moment before, speaks with a new energy. I concur. Maris, you will assemble your squadron before the enemy. I shall do the same. Major Keene, find whoever is in command now and report back with news. Captain Nelson, you will maintain 2 of your troops here to hold the castle and receive Major Keene's report. The rest shall join us in the advance. The strange enthusiasm which has infected Canaris seems to have also afflicted Captain Elson, as he grins in boyish glee. Casarosa, you and your men will remain here to guard the towers. The Deathborn's eyebrow climbs. Sir? Elson's grin turns ugly, and his high spirits turn instantly into a burning fury. Damn your insolence, sir. You will remain here to command the defense of this fortification, and you will do so until ordered otherwise or until the ending of the world. Casarosa nods. Very well, sir. Elson turns to the rest of his lieutenants, yourself included. Now, who will stay with the bastard? He asks, his voice still hot with fury. I don't know if I actually want to stay for this. Let's see. Would I actually want to stay for this? I mean, I guess to some degree, I would rather be with Casarosa because he's a fighter, and that tactical wise, he's a fighter. He definitely knows how to fight. And he can definitely get us out of a situation. My intelligence should also help. Whereas Elson, on the other hand, he likes glory. Glory can get you killed. So, especially when you're in a situation like this where you might have to use some unconventional means. So, I am going to volunteer to guard the castle with Casarosa. Yeah. You watch the rest of the regiment assemble itself and set off on its attack before heading back up the stairs to the tower where your men await. At the top of the stairs, you find Casarosa waiting for you. Let us not waste time, Draken, and see to making this position defensible, he says, his voice entirely neutral. You nod. Such a course of action gets no objection from you. Casarosa continues. First, I shall require you to place yourself and your men at my disposal. You blink in surprise as Casarosa's words sink in. Surely he does not expect you to simply subordinate yourself to an officer of the same rank, and a Deathborn besides. Apparently, he does. If the worst comes to pass and we find ourselves the only force holding this flank, then I shall require your complete and unquestioning obedience if we are to stand a comfortable chance of surviving this day with our honor intact. The Deathborn officer may have a point. You know Casarosa's mastery of the soldier's trade to be almost unmatched. Despite his bloodlust, often cold pragmatism, and callous manner, it is quite likely that he might be able to get you and your men out of this alive. However, should you survive in such a way, there is no doubt that Grenadier Square will look poorly upon your inability to maintain command of your own men. Such a thing could not be good for your own career. Although you doubt that either Casarosa or his troops would submit themselves to your command, surely you can dissuade him from usurping your command out from under you, should you so wish. Yeah, I don't think I want Casarosa trying to take my command. Whatever our options here, I try to convince him of the tactical merit of allowing me to retain command of my men. I make an attempt to persuade Casarosa to allow me to retain command of my men. Casarosa has no right to command my men. I shall tell him so bluntly, or I allow Casarosa to take command of my men. Well, shite. Let's try to convince him. Hopefully I can. You shake your head. Surely, Casarosa, you must realize that if we are to hold both towers, that we are to require one commander for each tower to defend both effectively. What benefit would there be in a unified command if we must need fight separately regardless? Your words give the other officers pause for a moment as he ruminates on your attempt at reason. Finally, he nods. Very well, it shall be so. Suddenly, you hear the sound of hobnailed boots pounding up the stairs. Both of you reach for your pistols, only to relax measurably when Major Keene's bedraggled figure emerges. Who's in command here? We are jointly in command, Casarosa replies, somewhat reluctantly. The Major looks at the two of you warily, but reports his news anyways. His Grace, the Duke of Havenport, sends his compliments and wishes to inform you that he is taking command of the army. He's also charged me to inform you that he is withdrawing from the field in the best order he can manage. He believes that our main priority should be to maintain the army in good order as we retreat. Casarosa takes this new intelligence coolly. Very well. What are our orders? Keen grits his teeth. You have Lord Havenport's leave to withdraw at your own discretion. Any questions? So we're just going to retreat like that. Huh. Withdraw from the field. What manner of cowardice is this? Keen's tone is icy as he replies. Cowardice? Havenport's brigade has lost 600 men. He is withdrawing from the field so that when tomorrow dawns, we will still have an army capable of resisting the Antari advance. If you would much rather prefer to buy the claim that we all held our ground and died gloriously for the cost of a mere 8 or 10,000 lives, then you may voice your thoughts freely, but do not, sirrah, cast snide insinuation upon the orders of your superiors. The major takes a deep breath to calm himself. Anything else? Sir, you can suck my balls. How about that? You can just literally suck my balls. Well, what else do we have here? Let's see. What about the rest of our regiment? Shall we begin our withdrawal then? Very well. Well, I think in this particular case, if I do very well, we will stand and hold his position. I can't ask these other questions. So, what about the rest of the regiment? King cast a furtive glance northwards into the thick fog of battle. Havenport's orders were for me to proceed to the castle and proceed no further. If you are capable of informing the rest of the regiment, do so. Otherwise, they're on their own. Casarosa nods, his face unreadable. Very well then. Oh. So we can either choose to retreat or we can attack. Or we can stay and try and defend this position. Okay, we're going to stay and defend it then. Keen's eyes go wide. Lieutenant, he asks, clearly thinking that you have gone quite mad. Sir, if the Antari bypass the rest of the regiment, they might pass through this position without opposition. Should they do so, they would be in a perfect position to strike the main army in the flank. I hope I would not need to elaborate. The major does not need further explanation to grasp the point. The majority of a battle's casualties are inflicted when the victorious army pursues the defeated one. Still, he seems skeptical. You would hold this position with 80 men. You nod. We shall try. I gladly give my life for crown and kingdom. My men would likely say the same. Keen breathes a long sigh, having clearly given up on convincing you to cut your losses. Very well, I will return to the Duke of Havenport and inform him of your decision. His tone makes it very clear that he does not expect to see any of you alive ever again. Saints go with you, gentlemen. No sooner does the major depart the room, does Casarosa turn to you. Very well then, Draken. Shall we see to the castle defenses? I have a plan which might... You raise your hand to interrupt as you feel the first tinges of a Bane signature emerge from the direction of the Antari. Casarosa, far from annoyed by your abrupt gesture, turns toward the northward-facing windows, his expression poised in question. You nod. Dragoons, make ready to repel attackers. You shout, sending the dragoons near you scrambling for weapons, cartridge boxes, and prearranged firing positions. Tension is high as you wait for the pinpricks in your mind's eye to come out the fog. Oddly enough, those men approaching have neither the formation nor the speed of an Antari attack. Regardless, you stand ready to fight off any attack and keep pistols and sabers at hand. It is only when the approaching figures ride out of the fog that you recognize the gray, green, and red of dragoon tunics. Stand down, your frantic voice orders as your fellow dragoons ride up into the shadow of the tower. Casarosa stares at them as they pass under the sights of his pistols. Some of the newcomers are bloodied and bruised, but there are too many of them still left unscathed to be a truly beaten force. They shouldn't be here, and yet here they are. You find yourself saying. The other officer nods. Then let us find out why. The languid young man at the head of the retreating dragoons manages a rather aggravating sneer at you, and Kazarosta approaches him on foot. Lieutenant Whittlebrook joined our squadron last week. Kazarosta explains to you while you are still some distance away. The Saints have seen fit to make him a troop commander, though I may disagree with their opinion. The leader of the newcomers looks down his long hooked nose at you as he draws close. Lieutenant Dracone, was it? How goes the defense? He asks in an infuriatingly superior tone, ignoring Kazarosta entirely. That's probably not a very good way to do this. I'll answer coldly. There's been nothing worth reporting, Lieutenant. Is there anything else? You ask. Your voice is cold and sharp as steel. Kazarosa steps forward without warning. What are you doing here, Whittlebrook? Where's the rest of the regiment? He asks bluntly. Whittlebrook ignores him entirely, addressing his response to you as if Kazarosa were not even there. Captain Nelson bade me to withdraw from the field. The Antari cavalry are advancing in great force upon this flank, and he wished for us to report this news to high command, he says, as if he were responding to an accusation and not a mere question. Do you have an issue with Captain Elson's orders? You seriously doubt that Elson or any other sane commander would order a nearly unscathed troop to leave the field at such a critical juncture. A single messenger would have sufficed to send news. Clearly, Whittlebrook is lying. Kazarosa shakes his head. Stop trying to lie, Whittlebrook. You're very bad at it. The mounted officer grits his teeth in anger and he glares at you. Surely you will not allow this death-born bastard to impugn my honor, he demands. Oh, this guy is just a bundle of joy. Surely I shall. Tell us the truth. Whittlebrook recoils in his saddle as if hit by a musket ball. Musket ball. Ooh, I apologize. Surely you cannot, he sputters. He can and he will, Kazarosa answers, as cold as ice. That damn fool Elton ordered us to meet the Antari horse in a charge. The mounted lieutenant blurts out. I will not carry out my orders if there ain't no sense to them. Kazarosa nods. Then why attempt to flee the battle entirely? Surely you know that your men are needed here. Are you blind as well as death-born, you blockheaded bastard? Whittlebrook shouts. This battle is lost, and I will not die, Sarah, for the likes of you. Really? So you're just going to turn around and retreat like this? Well, convince Whittlebrook of the dire consequences of his proposed actions. Whittlebrook is a lost cause. I speak to his men instead. Let's just speak to him. Well, speak to the men, because Whittlebrook, he's a coward. Let him die running and his back turned the other way. You step past Whittlebrook and address his men directly. Gentlemen, your commanding officer would have you follow him into dishonor, maybe even a deserter's death. I offer you another chance. Another choice. A better choice. One of the men in the back pipes up. What? Get killed with you lot instead? You sound like a good sort, but I don't much fancy dying. You honestly have no response to that. You had thought yourself more eloquent than this. Lieutenant Whittlebrook speaks up, clearly annoyed with your attempt to steal his troops out from under him. Silence, Sarah. I have heard enough of your dribblings. Clearly out of patience, the other lieutenant waves you off irritably. Oh boy. Whittlebrook sniffs haughtily in his saddle. Now I bid you good day, he turns to leave. The shallow report of a pistol rings out. The mounted officer jerks straight in his saddle before sliding off and falling to the ground. A look of shock in his face and a bloody hole in the side of his head. Thoroughly spooked, Whittlebrook's horse sprints off into the powder smoke. Holstering his still smoking pistol, Kazarosa turns to the now departed officer's men, his voice ringing loud and clear. The penalty for desertion is death by firing squad, gentlemen. Fight with us or die. That is your choice. Despite Kazarosa's uncompromising line, his men move to back him. From behind your back, you can hear the clicks of carbines being set to full cock. You do not need to turn around to know that Kazarosa's men stand ready to carry out their commanding officer's threat if need be. The new commander of Whittlebrook's troops A nervous cornet of 16 rides forward. "We are at your command, sir." He gulps, shifting in a way which seems to indicate that the lad's trousers may no longer entirely be dry. Your death-born comrade nods, acting as if nothing about the situation were abnormal at all, and as if he had not just murdered a fellow officer in cold blood. "Very good. Get your men ready and see us in the second floor of the Western Tower in 5 minutes." All right, see, that's why I like Casarosa. He gets things done. He kind of reminds me of, well, I won't say he kind of reminds me of Tyrion Logain, but he does kind of remind me of Tyrion Logain from Dragon Age. I kind of like certain aspects of Casarosa. I mean, he's brutal as hell, but I mean, you can't argue with the results. So I mean, there's that. It's only the work of a minute to have your men assemble at your designated line of defense between the two towers of Castle Blogia, a space some 50 paces wide. Though hardly a great distance, you have no doubt that your 40 men might be a bit hard-pressed in defending it against Saints knows how many Antari cavalry, even with Casarosa's troop providing cover fire from the tower. With the area ahead clear for now, perhaps it would be best to find some way to bolster your defenses in the short amount of time you have before the enemy is upon you. Okay, we can rally the men with a speech. They will fight better if their spirits are high. I should find a way to make my defensive position more formidable. A barricade, perhaps. I shall prepare the ground around my position to help stop up any Antari charge, or I cannot think of anything I could do. Let's see. What? Well, I mean, I don't think I could actually rally the men. I mean, we already tried to turn around and steal Widowbrook's troops, and that didn't seem to work out too well for us. Let's see. Let's try a barricade. Let's see how that works. We should be smart enough to pull that off. An excellent idea. Though you've no engineers with you and your men were never issued with shovels or entrenching tools, there's plenty of loose stone from the tumble-down castle walls around you. It would only be the work of a few minutes to fortify your positions appreciably. How would you like to go about it? I'll set up barricades in a way which will do the most damage to the Antari. I want to bottle the Antari into a narrow passage to slow them down. A straight barricade between the two castle towers will suffice well enough. Perhaps a barricade would prove a waste of time. Well, I'm definitely going to do the barricade, so there's that. I mean, we do need to inflict the most damage. And I think with it, Casarosa firing down from the castle, that would also help us too. So let's set up a barricade in a way which will do the most damage to the Antari. Despite your all but encyclopedia knowledge of fighting instructions and tactical manuals, you cannot for the life of you think of a layout or configuration of barricades that might prove exceptionally effective against a mass of charging Antari cavalry. However, you do know that fortress walls are often built with detached fortified positions called ravelins, something which would not only allow you to protect your men, but also give them the opportunity to fire into the exposed flanks of the enemy as they are diverted into two narrow passages to each side, much like the way an infantry square might be used. To your knowledge, nobody has ever considered the idea before, but the more you think about it, the better a notion it seems to become. Soon, your men are frantically hauling bits of masonry and loose brush into position. Within minutes, a tiny chest-high fortress materializes, built like a wedge with the point facing the enemy as to your specifications. You hope your brilliant little idea works as it should. This also kind of reminds me of, I think it was Yukimura Sanada during the siege of Osaka, how he built the little mini fortress or whatever that kind of guarded one of the breached walls, and it did a lot of damage to Ieyasu's forces in the end. Anyway, that's kind of nice though that we kind of build that little palisade there to kind of help us. You feel the oncoming Antari horses before you see or even hear them. The ground in the shadow of Castle Blogia trembles with the approach of the great tide of horse and soldiery, which you know is bearing down on you with speed beyond that of any man. Clumps of sod rattle along the ground as the enemy cavalry ride ever closer. The masonry to each side of your flimsy defensive line begins to shake and rumble. The distant cries of your multitudinous attackers grow until they become a thunderous, throatless roar. For a moment, you feel as if are a stone witnessing the world's ending. Your men stand firm against the sound and fury, clinging to their positions with a desperation which they hide well, but not well enough to conceal from you. Then, out of the powder fog, the enemy materializes like an army of ghosts, their blades and helms and scraps of chainmail glittering in the dying sun as they rush towards you into the narrow 50-pace gap which you and your dragoons must hold. Oh, great. This should be lovely. And hopefully it will work out well, but we'll see. The first wave of the Antari cavalry are great in number, formidable in skill, and all but invisible in their courage. It is their lack of organization which dooms them. Perhaps they had not been told of the narrowness of the passage they would have to force. Perhaps the sheer mass of their vanguard simply made it impossible to do anything other than try to force a 400 men into a square which could, at best, fit half that number. Either way, the first ranks of Antari cavalry fall into confusion as their mounts and men grind into each other, smashing into each other's flanks. Their charge devolves into a packed, constricted mass, pushed forward only by the momentum of those behind them. Kazarosa's dragoons could not have possibly missed. The stone walls around you bury themselves in powder smoke as the concussive crack of a single carbine volley pierces the sound of confused horses and screaming men. The Antari are in even more confusion now as men fall by the dozens, struck down by the hidden gunmen firing upon their flanks. The Antari press onward towards your men, thrown forward either by sheer blind courage or the confused eagerness of the men behind them, rendered ignorant of the carnage awaiting them by the powder smoke and sound of battle. At 20 paces, your men open fire. The first ranks of the Antari charge crumble and die, their screams buried under the sound of whoos and the war cries of those behind them. The Antari have regained their momentum. You gird yourself for battle, pistol in one hand, saber in the other, as the Antari horsemen charge into your beleaguered dragoons and begin the struggle in earnest. The first of the Antari horses comes roaring at you like a dumb beast, a throaty battle cry on his lips and saber held high over his head. It is almost as if he does not even expect to meet any resistance. His arrogance proves his undoing. Your opponent may not have seen the barricade before you, but his horse does. As the big animal leaps to clear the obstruction, you duck below. Your blade lashes out like a silver whip and buries itself deep into the animal's belly. The Antari horse's legs give way as it lands and its rider goes flying in a heap. To finish the day's man off, it's mere child's play. The next few Antari you face fare no better. Confused by the sudden resistance of your stalwart men, assailed from both flanks by a hail of carbine balls, those that make it to your line are quickly cut down. Despite their losses, the Antari keep pressing forwards, courage or raw stupidity overwhelming sense or caution. Each enemy horseman seems more dangerous than the last, and soon you can feel your arms beginning to strain from the fatigue of combat. More Antari surge forward, their iron-shod horses riding over the bodies of their slain predecessors. There is nothing of the stuff of confusion or pause in them. They ride right for you, sabers flashing, their horses at full gallop. The Antari rush your men and slough off the pointed frontage of your barricade like water off a slop roof. It seems your stroke of inspiration has paid off. The Antari slough off to either side as your men stab and slash at their unprotected flanks. The survivors of their first ill-fated rush fall back into disarray, their retreat sped by a parting volley from the towers. A thunderous volley erupts from above you. Billows of powder smoke obscure the narrow passage. The Antari horsemen before you, so leonine in their fury and invisibility not an instant before, are brought down like so many bottles of glass, shattering as they fall. To your surprise, the Antari do not try to rush forward again. Instead, they reel, turn, and retreat. Your men jeer them as they go, their pride at having weathered the storm, mingling with their relief at being alive. So, as you can see, you could have easily died there if you didn't pick the right things or if you didn't have the right skills in order to pull off the right things. So this could have easily went the other way. I've actually had situations where I failed, and I think I did have one situation where I failed and failed and failed, and I had to replay the chapter before this in order to turn around and get to a proper ending or whatever. So you can really mess up in these situations, so you have to be careful. All right. What follows is an interminable series of raids and probes by the Antari horse. Having failed to force your passage through brute force, the Antari begin sending parties of a dozen or so to dash in on their fleet horses and harass your troops, perhaps to draw them out into the open where they could be more easily dealt with. Other parties fire pot shots at your supporting dragoons in the castle towers. You give your men standing orders to hold their positions against the obvious Antari baiting. A particularly fierce harassing attack almost reaches your line. However, when one of your men springs forward to chase the retreating raiders, Staff Sergeant Lansrell hauls him back into the line by the back of the collar. The next time the Antari send in a raiding force, you take no chances. You order your men to fire a volley at the enemy. Your troops' fire brings down half the enemy party and sends the survivors into headlong flight. The next few Antari probes were driven back with similarly vigorous fire from all three troops. As you watch another Antari raiding party flee back into the smoke, your staff sergeant pulls you aside. It appears that, as futile as the Antari attacks have been, they have done your defenders some harm. Your men are out of ammunition. Runners sent to your fellow officers report that the situation is just as dire. Between the three of your troops, you've not even enough powder and shot remains to fire off a single volley. When the men hear of this, they grumble and look nervously over their shoulders. We fought ourselves dry. They can't bloody well hang us for running now, you hear one of them say. While retreat without orders would still theoretically be desertion, perhaps anybody judging your actions would do so with more leniency, knowing that you had done all that you reasonably could to slow the enemy. Lansrell turns to you, his expression pitched as if to say, "What now, sir? What now, indeed?" Let's see our choices here. We've been ordered to defend this position, and we will do so until the ending of the world if need be. We do not need ammunition to use our sabers. If the Antari break through here, the entire army is in danger. That cannot be allowed. I cannot leave, but I can allow my men to. I shall let everyone not willing to fight to the death escape with their lives. I'm not going to die here on the order of a man who is likely already dead. I'll simply walk into a cloud of powder smoke and slip away. I'm not going to do that. Maybe if I was more ruthless, I'd do that. Since I am going the mercy route, I guess I will say I cannot leave, but I can allow my men to do so. They're loyal to me, so maybe they'll stick around and stay with me, perhaps? You return your staff sergeant's gaze. I will not fight with any men who would rather live than defend the honor of his regiment and his king. Any man who wishes to flee may do so. Lansrell nods and goes off to inform the men. After a few minutes of silence, you count your men again to find a handful of them gone from your line. At least those men that remain have chosen to fight alongside you to the last. Well, I guess that works. I mean, you can't expect everybody to turn around and be, brave in this situation. If they want to choose that, then by all means. So they'll pay for that price. They'll pay for their decisions later on. Whew. Okay. Let's see here. Without ammunition, your carbines becomes no more than glorified clubs. You order your men to take them to the rear so that they do not get in the way of the next assault. No sooner do your men settle back into position than the ground begins rumbling again. This time, however, you hear another, higher sound layered over the now familiar cacophony of hoofbeats and war cries. A low, deep whistling moan, louder and higher with every passing second until it becomes a mad shriek. You swallow hard. You know exactly what's coming next. When the enemy finally emerges from the powder fog, a tremor of fear and shock ripples through your men, for the shapes before you are the outlines of massively armored riders and gigantic war horses and war horses, forms blazing with the blue glow of bane fire. The great specters solidify, and dark shapes become steel and flesh and lance and blade. At long last, you see the angel wings strapped to each rider's back, their feathers shrieking as the air passes over them. Church hussars. Oh, well, this is going to be wonderful. Shining mountains of steel and bane fire, the Antari hussars charge ever closer, long lances blazing blue in the darkening sun. There are not many, these terrifying riders, a dozen at most, but they would be more than a match for an entire squadron of dragoons, let alone the few dozen men standing with you. The world shatters as the dragoons in the castle towers fire their last carefully hoarded reserves of powder and shot in a final volley. The enemy cavalry ride through before the smoke even clears. For an instant, you wonder if none of the hussars have been hit at all. It's only when they are 36 paces from your position that you see the dents and splashes of shattered lead on their shiny flint mail. Gunpowder will do no good against these monsters in men's bodies. Your saber is tight in your hand as the hussars gallop ever closer. Time seems to slow, and the world falls away, leaving only you, your men, and your terrible, unstoppable enemies in their bane-wrought armor and their long, vicious lances. Time stops the instant is frozen as the Antari hit your line. All you know is that the lead hussar is before you, that his horse is riding at full gallop, and that the tip of his lance has just swept by your head with only a few centimeters to spare. Here's your chance. Your dance upon the razor's edge between death and glory. You take a quick breath and face the enemy head on. Lunge forward and get close enough to use my saber. Yeah, that's definitely not going to work. Be clever, find a way to unhorse the hussar and gut him before he can recover. Or you rally some of my men to me and attack the enemy from all sides. Again, I'm not that charismatic. So let's hope my intelligence is what can rule the day here, because it's my highest stat. So let's be clever and see what happens. You think quickly, faster than you've ever thought in your life, an instant solution to the doom that looms so high in your mind. Thankfully, your mind does not fail you. Your solution is hardly honorable and far from fair, but it just might work. You drop to your knees as the blood-red shaft of the Antari lance passes over your head. You wait for the perfect moment as the hussar's horse, so heavy and unwieldy in such close quarters, gallops past you. Your saber lashes out, low and quick. You are rewarded by a spray of warm blood and an ear-piercing scream as the hussar's horse collapses under its newly hamstrung legs. Its rider, slowed by surprise and confusion, tumbles from his saddle as his mount crumbles under him. There's no time to be lost. You leap to the side of your down but flailing opponent and begin a frantic assault on his tiny gaps in his armor. One of your thrusts, your third or fourth, strikes home. There's a sharp gurgle and a spray of blood. Then your foe moves no more. You stagger forward into the fight as you look around you with bleary and powder-stung eyes, only to be pushed aside by a great wave of green-gray pouring from the entrance of both castle towers, their unbloodied sabers gleaming in the dying sunlight as they fall upon the Antari from both flanks. Your men fight frantically, but they keep their heads. All around you, teams of green, gray, and red strike as teams, overwhelming their powerful foes with clever tactics and practiced blows. One by one, the Antari hussars fall. One or two are caught in a swirling storm of blades, cut down by a lucky slash across an unprotected armpit or throat. Others soon follow, hauled from their horses, and are all but kicked apart by your desperately struggling dragoons. Each small victory costs your men dear, but as you remind yourself with a great deal of bitterness, there are far more of you than there are of them. Within minutes, only a handful of hussars remain ahorse and fighting. One of them reaches for a horn at his belt with one hand as he fends off your dragoons with a lightning-clad battle axe in the other. The hussar puts the horn to his lips and his weapon is knocked out of his other hand. A low, mournful note sounds through the bloody through the bloody and corpse-strewn passage which has cost you so much to hold. The melancholy sound seems to last forever, even as the horn blower tumbles from his bloodied and dying mount. You watch as one of your men seize the horn blower's great axe and hefts it over his head, bringing it down upon the former owner's chest with both hands. The horn sound terminates with a sharp, distorted shriek. Those few hussars steal a horse, pull their mounts away from your exhausted and bloody dragoons, and ride away. Okay, so I guess we actually survived this, huh? You breathe deep, trying your best not to gag at the acrid stench of death and powder as the rancid air fills your lungs. You stagger to one of the tower walls and slump against it, feeling your racing heart slow as you hear the sound of retreating hooves diminish to silence. So great is your exhaustion that it takes you what must have been an embarrassingly long time to realize that you no longer hear the distant thunder of cannon or the crackle of musketry. The only sound that still reaches your ears are the moans of the wounded and dying, the shallow breaths of those still lucky enough to be on their feet, and the low, quiet whistling of the blackening wind. A lanky, bloodied form settles against the wall beside you, Kazarosta, a bruised hand clamped over the left side of his face, his saber belt torn and dangling from his waist, his tunic torn in a dozen places. For a moment, you both slump against the ancient stone. Then he reaches for his neck and unties the smeared and soiled silk cravat about his neck one-handed. He pulls his hand away from his face for a second, just long enough for you to see the bloody ruin of his face, cheeks seared with bane fire, scraps of skin fluttering obscenely in the dirty air, runnels of steaming fluid dripping from the empty, horrible hole where his eye had once been. You take in all these things in the moment it takes your fellow officer to tie the silk about his head to cover his wound. Well then, Lieutenant Daeron, he said, as if half his face were not swathed in white cloth, slowly staining red and sick yellow. We should best prepare for their next attack. Anxiety and sheer incredulity overtake your senses as you stare blankly into the charnel house before you, now composed of more dead than living. Next attack? You whisper as if the concept were as alien to you as a bull in skirts. Kazarosa nods, wincing as he does. Yes, it would be best if we augmented our defensive position somehow. We might pile the bodies into walls and obstacles. I dare say we have enough of them. Is that not so? You Google in shock at your fellow officer's cold, toneless words as a furious response bubbles up your throat. And I got 2 achievements there. Hold the line. You defended a seemingly impossible situation, I think it said. Are you going to go away? Thank you. Go away. There you go. All right. Before you have a chance to utter it, you hear the sound of hoofbeats once again. Your men hear it too. They tense perceptibly. Immediately, you reach for your saber, only to find it missing. You must have discarded it at some point near the end of your last engagement. After a moment's panic, you calm yourself. The sound is no more than that of a single horse, and it comes from the direction of your own army, not the Antari. The shape of a man and rider coalesce out of the thinning powder smoke. It is Major Keen, his tunic bloodied, his helmet scored with cuts, a large swath of party-colored Kentari cloak wrapped around his blood-soaked middle. With practiced but labored grace, he dismounts. You muster as much of your strength as you can to bring your hand up to salute, but the major shakes his head. You let your hand drop. The Lieutenant Daeron, Lieutenant Kazarosta, His Grace the Duke of Havenport sends his compliments. Kazarosta nods. Does he require us to hold this position for much longer? He asks with a chilling nonchalance. Keen looks at the charnel house about you. From a starting strength of nearly 120 men, you doubt that half are still alive. Of your own men, you can only pick out a dozen or so survivors, though you hope that there are others merely wounded and not dead. Those that do not stand seem on the verge of complete exhaustion. The major shakes his head. No, thank the saints. Our army has retreated into the forest. The line infantry have begun forming into a column for the march back south. You are to effect your withdrawal immediately. The army is safe. You've done your duty. You slump back against the wall. Keen's words echo in your mind. A voice screams at you from some place deep inside. You have work to do. The horses must be saddled. The men must be formed up. Your dead must be burned. The voice fades as your knees buckle under you and you feel tears run down your face. Finally, the voice quiets entirely as you let the black edges of your unconsciousness engulf you entirely. Okay, now we're in the epilogue. Let's see, wherein the cavalry officer is awarded just recompense for his actions. Let's see what we have for the state of the war. And the loyalty of my men is at 85. My reputation is 101%. Okay. I mean, I can take that. State of the war. Let's see if there's anything there. Nope, there's nothing there. Yep, that's still the same. And I'm guessing it's because it's the end of the game. So yeah. 6 days after the Battle of Blogia, sure. The battered but defiant remnants of the royal army marched through the gates of Thuringia. 5 days after that, a party of scouts returned jubilant with the news that the Antari are retreating back north, too weary to risk a second clash against an army which they had left too intact to ensure victory. One morning, 3 weeks after the battle, you pull open the curtains and behold in Thuringia's harbor a giant ship of the line. From your window facing the sea, you are just close enough to see the name gilded onto the warship's heavily ornamented stern. She is the HMS Rindleware, a warship of 98 guns, the flagship of the Royal Daeron Navy. Your heart catches in your throat as you see the massive banner flying from her main mast, bearing the golden griffins and silver towers of the royal standard. The king has come to Antari. That afternoon, you receive a knock on your door. It is Major Keen, now temporary commanding officer of your regiment. "Good day, Lieutenant," he says, his somber expression completely at odds with his friendly greeting. You sketch a salute as the major hands you a small envelope of thick vellum. "You are summoned before the King's Majesty," he says, without trace of emotion. "The two of you leave without delay. You have no intention of disobeying an order from your king." The day is beautiful. The day is a beautiful one, with the heat of the early afternoon sun swept away by the cooling breeze of the sea. Keen seems to care little for it. The dragoon's major's eyes are dull and lifeless as he walks alongside you down the street. You fully understand why. The regiment's desperate fight on the left flank may have helped save the entire army, but it also exacted a heavy toll. Out of the 700 men that rode into battle that morning, only half that number came back out alive. Captain Elson was not among them, nor was Lieutenant Colonel Morris or a dozen other officers whom you could name. Even those that survived did not do so without scars. The Duke of Canaris will never be able to walk again. The healers were able to grow back Casarosa's eye, but the skin on the left side of his face will be forever blackened and cracked where the Banefire charred it. The regiment is a shadow of its former self. Every so often, Keem will make a sidelong glance at you, hoping perhaps that you might disrupt the monotony of your boot heels against the cobbles with some sort of conversation. God, okay. Wow. Elson died. Huh. I did not think that would happen. I didn't know he could die, actually. Because does he survive? Because I think he might have survived in one of mine. But I guess in that particular one, I was a better fighter, or certain things may have been different. I'm not sure, but yeah, I didn't know Captain Nelson actually died. It's been a long time since I played this game. Again, this was one of the first ones I played, and even Guns of Infinity, it's been years since I played it. So yeah, but I didn't expect that actually. Huh. Ask why Antari withdrew. The major shrugs. The prevailing opinion among the senior staff is that the Prince Corbett had expected to annihilate us at Blogia. By being able to extract the majority of our forces intact, we have put paid to that plan. Once the Antari realized that we held too strong a position to take by storm, they withdrew. You raise an eyebrow. Surely the Antari had enough men to simply besiege the town. Keen shakes his head. Enough men, but not enough time. They cannot starve us out, since the town can be supplied from sea with ease. The only way would be to sap the walls. Such a process would likely take months. By harvest time, the Corbeard's men will be deserting in mass simply to have enough grain to cut to feed. They would be deserting in mass simply to have enough grain cut to feed their families. You nod, finding nothing in Keen's explanation to dispute. Ask about the king's visit. The major's face hardens when you inquire about his majesty's presence. We can be certain that he is here to go through the motions. Honors, speeches, that lot. He knighted your friend Casarosa this morning and gave him a captain's commission besides for his actions during the battle. You try not to make your surprise too obvious. You've never met your king before, but if he is the sort of man to bestow such high honor upon a man not even born of Bane blood, you cannot help but wonder what he wants with you. Taking advantage of your pause, the major continues. There's also the possibility that His Majesty is here to take personal command, though I cannot see how he would be much of any improvement over his illustrious predecessor, as untested as he is. You nod non-committally. You know for a fact that King Miguel has never seen battle before. You can only hope that if he does plan to take command, he will prove a quick study. Ask about the condition of the army as a whole. Major King shakes his head, his features laden with sadness. This army has lost a great deal, many of its finest leaders. The greater part of the infantry and the artillery have come out of the battle intact, but who will lead them now that so many of our brother officers are dead and on the field? You nod in agreement. You've seen the list of officers slain at Blogia, a long and depressing list. It was a list of some of the army's finest soldiers. The Duke of Wolfram, struck down by an Antari Hussar's burning longsword. The Baron of Turbridge, cut down as his brigade routed around him. Lord Lieutenant Colonel Sir Enrique Hunter, and the battalion of grenadiers he rallied around him, dead almost to a man. The major takes a deep, shuddering breath, as if he were almost on the verge of tears. The Antari have hurt us deeper than they likely know. Good Lord. You continue onwards, uncomfortably silent, until finally the major ushers you into the building which had, not so long ago, served as the Duke of Wolfram's headquarters. A pair of grenadiers greet you and Keen at the door. Both wear the enameled badges of House Rendelware. They are members of the king's personal guards. His task complete, the major leaves you under the watchful eye of your orange-jacketed ushers. The two infantrymen lead you down the hallway into the great hall which had played host to the Duke of Wolfram's reception not a month ago. A single look through the open door tells you all you need to know about the importance of the situation. Lined up on each side of the hall stand lieutenant colonels, and generals of brigade, standing as stock still as a gallery of footmen. The entirety of their attention is focused upon the two conversing men at the far end of the hall. One of them, standing officiously, is the Duke of Havenport, newly promoted to lieutenant general in place of the late Duke of Wolfram. The other sits next to Havenport in a high-backed wooden chair. A wiry, handsome man of about 20, his auburn hair cut short in the latest fashion. Your king. As the two grenadiers at your sides escort the threshold of the hall, the conversation between your king and his newly appointed general becomes loud enough for you to hear. Your Majesty, you hear Havenport say in his urbane tenor, it is my opinion that a favorable conclusion to the war through this expeditionary force is no longer viable. Our army is battered, not broken, Havenport, the king replies, his voice seasoned with reproach. we may yet see it reforged into the instrument we desire under our personal command. You see, Haven Point wince with every emphasis of the majestic plural. The nobleman's soothing tone begins to crack as he voices his reply. Your Majesty, we've lost nearly 3,000 men, and another 1,000 shall be in no condition to fight ever again. The king waves away Havenport's objections as if it were a noxious cloud of smoke. We are well aware of the losses our armies have sustained, and we will see them made good, even if we must wheel half the ships of the Northern Fleet stripped of their marines and fill the rest of the gaps with the conscripted poor. To this, Havenport attempts a different tack. Even so, Your Majesty, it would take months for the army to be made whole once again. To risk the royal personages whilst the ranks remain depleted is a most dangerous course of action. Your sovereign's response is a most unkingly snort of derision. Is that what you mean to say? Surely you could not be dancing around the fact that we are untested in battle and thus unsuited for personal command. The Antari general's desperate attempt to muster a reply is cut short by the sound of your two escorts pounding the butts of their muskets against the wooden floor. Lord Lieutenant Daeron of the Royal Dragoons requests permission to approach the King's Majesty, announces the taller of the two, as if he were a court herald. The young red-headed king nods as his face takes on the courtly mask of a stern warrior prince. You may approach us, Lieutenant. You feel your palms turn damp and your face turn pale as you step forward. You try your hardest to remember all the courtly graces you try your hardest to remember all of the courtly graces that were taught to you in your childhood as you step forward into the presence of your king and sovereign. With your helmet tucked under one shoulder, you approach no closer than 10 paces from where your king sits, carefully keeping your eyes averted as you do. Lord Lieutenant Daeron Daeron of the Royal Dragoon Regiment, the king begins, his tone a cold and mechanical contrast to the animated voice which you had overheard just a few moments ago. For your heroic conduct during the military action at the field of Blogia during the summer of this, the 7th year of our reign, as an officer in our service, it is our pleasure that you be awarded the commission of captain and given command of 6th Squadron, Royal Dragoons. In addition, we have determined your actions of the aforementioned battle to have played a critical part in the preservation of our armies. Thus, it is our pleasure to bestow upon you an annuity of 180 gold crowns to be paid from our personal accounts as a small token of our thanks. As nervous as you are, you manage to speak the appropriate words of gratitude without making an ass of yourself. A great relief. However, the king does not dismiss you. There's one more thing. The entire world seems to take a breath as you do your best not to meet your sovereign's grace. Kneel. Oh, okay. There's a lot of things that just popped up there. And I need them to actually go away. Thank you. All right. You drop to your knees immediately. You know what is coming. The king leaps to his feet, his scepter clutched in one hand. We have lost a great deal over the past few weeks. We have lost the initiative and we have lost much pride. But worst of all, we've lost some of the finest soldiers in our service. Our army shall be as a jewel without luster with the mournful absence of those great men. The room is enraptured now. You can feel the gazes of men infinitely your senior upon your back bent. The king continues on. However, we are not without joy. This faithful soldier who kneels before us has proven himself a worthy successor to the illustrious name so cruelly taken from us. We bear much hope for the future of this promising officer and those like him, who have distinguished themselves as heroes in a moment of defeat. Your king extends a hand, 2 fingers outstretched. He lifts your chin up, and for the first time you see him eye to eye. By the power vested in me by heavenly mandate, and as Grand Master of the Red, I name you, Lord Daeron Daeron, Knight Companion of the Order of St. Joshua. You tense yourself for the blow an instant before it comes. A short, sharp strike of the royal scepter against your chest. enough to knock the wind out of you, perhaps leave a bruise but little else. Let that be the last insult you will ever allow to pass unanswered. The king steps back, the ritual almost complete. You hold your breath, waiting for the last words that will make you a knight of the Order's militant. Arise, Sir Daeron, and find glory through battle. You emerge into the afternoon sun with a head full of thoughts pulling your mind in half a dozen different directions. You will need to have your uniforms altered, first of all. You have no doubt there will be a great deal of paperwork for the provisions of your new command, not to mention the reinforcements of the new command to begin with. New officers, NCOs, will need to be selected. There would, of course, also be the business of ordering the bane-hardened weapon and armor of a knight of the Order's militant, and the golden spurs of your new title besides. You take a deep breath, for those tasks would only be the beginning of your labors. After all, there's still a war to win. To be continued in Book 2, Guns of Infinity. And we became a national hero because of that. What did that say? You won every decoration in a single playthrough, while creating a heroic reputation will not soon be forgotten, I guess. But yeah, that was Sabres of Infinity. So, in the end, we became a Knight of the Order's Militant. We got the rank of Captain. Even though there were a lot of sacrifices, we did get a lot. We did gain a lot as far as reputation and things like that. But yeah, we will continue this in Guns of Infinity. So, you know, if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. And also let me know what you think about this. Because again, you know, if there's enough reception on these things, I'm more than happy to play the entire series and more. But yeah, let me know what you think about this, and I will continue this series. So we'll pick up with Guns of Infinity next. If you want me to, I can cover some of the lore things that are on the website. I'll put a post up about it so you can kind of get an idea of what they actually are, and then we'll do a poll on it or something like that, and we will see where the feeling of everyone is, and then we will go from there. But as my usual ending spiel go, if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have many other things in the future. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section. They usually come to my phone, and I will get them at some point. If I don't respond immediately, it's probably because I'm busy or something like that, or probably thinking of a witty response and stuff like that. But yeah. So yeah, that was Sabres of Infinity. And next we will continue with Guns of Infinity and the story of Lord Daeron de Dracon, now a captain instead of a lieutenant, and a Knight of the Order's Militant. So, and the next one is going to be pretty long. I know the next Guns of Infinity is pretty long. There's a lot of stuff in there. You're going to start getting into the political intrigue and things like that. So, you know, you might even get into some romance as well. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it with this playthrough, but you know, we'll see how things go and we will take it from there. So I really hope everyone enjoyed the series. It has been my pleasure to turn around and give you this series. And hey, if you like this game, pick it up. I mean, again, it's only a couple bucks. I think it's like maybe $3 or $4 on the Steam. You can also get it on your mobile as well. That's where I got all these games from. I didn't get them on Steam because at the time, Choice of Games actually wasn't on Steam. I don't think any of them were on Steam. So all these games were on my phone. But yeah, I would definitely encourage anybody to play it. They have a ton of replayability and the world is very interesting and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, I would definitely encourage anyone to pick it up and, you know, take a whack at it. See how your Lord turns out and see if you enjoy it as much as I did and as much as I've enjoyed playing the series as a whole. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you in Guns of Infinity. See you.